Kesubos Daf continues the Gemara's discussion about a man's claim that his wife is not a basula and therefore he wants out of the marriage and possibly he wants a ksuba. The Gemara will primarily be bringing lists of people who came to Talmid Chachamim and how they handled the situation, how they were able to convince the husband that their wife really possibly was a basula. The Gemara will discuss whether or not he is believed if he says that he just found an opening. The Gemara will give a number of halachas about how the ksuba is collected. Towards the end of the daf, we'll have our first new Mishnah of the Masechta, which will talk about the institution of a ksuba and how it works. Following that, the Gemara will give a Gadata explaining the names of various different things and various words and how they came about. So let's begin the Gemara. The Gemara is discussing, we had just seen that when a man says Pesach B'Suach Matzasi, he is trusted. We do believe him that he knows what he's talking about. He did find a Pesach B'Suach, and we also believe that he's telling the truth, such that we would not make him pay the ksuba. He no longer has to pay his wife ksuba. He promised her the ksuba on the assumption that she was a basula, and he found that she's not. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel that the reason for it is as follows. He quotes Rav Shimon ben Elazar, who says that the entire concept of ksuba is a takanas chachamim, something that the chachamim created in order to give Jewish women faith and confidence in their marriage, and it was given 200 zuz was the amount that was set aside for a psula. For an almana was 100 zuz, and because the chacham created it, they have the right to decide in what situations they're taking it away. And they said that a man who says Pesach B'Suach Mitzasi, he found an opening, he is trusted, and since they're the ones who created it, they could trust him. So says the Gemara, but what was the point in making a takana that's not going to be functional? They wanted to give the wives trust that they have financial security, but the husband could just get out of it. I'll say Pesach B'Suach Matzasi. Gemara says no. The Chachamim understood that a man is not going to waste money on a wedding in order to save money on the ksuba. If he wanted to get out of this, he would do it before he paid for the wedding. Then he could save the money on the ksuba and he could save the money on the wedding. Since he went through with the wedding, obviously does want to marry this woman. He wants to stay married to her, and the only reason that he's claiming Pesach B'Suach Matzasi is because it's really true. He really believes that to be the case. Okay, now the Gemara brings a brisa which discusses how the ksuba is collected. So the Gemara says that it is collected from ziburis. Ziburis is lowest quality land. The Gemara generally divides land into three rankings: highest, medium, and lowest. Lowest is the hardest to sell. The coin value is the same, but it's harder to sell. And therefore it's not preferred. So if he wants to pay with land, he pays with ziburis. What's the reason? So the Gemara first says because the brisa first says because it's a knas. It's a fine. So the Gemara asks, it's not a fine. He didn't do anything wrong. Why is anybody being fined? The ksuba is not a fine. So the Gemara says, no, what it means to say is that it's a takanas chachamim. It's something that was created by the chachamim and therefore was only created to be collected from ziburis, lowest quality land. Now, says the Gemara, says the Brisa further, this is all according to the Tanakama. Or Shimon ben Gamliel says that actually ksuba is a deraisa, ksuba is a halacha that comes from the Torah itself. It's not a takanas chachamim. Now, the Gemara is going to explain what the source of that is, but the Gemara first brings a Brisa that says the opposite. The Gemara brings a Brisa that says that the Tanakama says that the ksuba is learned out of a pasuk, and Shimon ben Gamliel says it's only midirabanan. Now, so that's a contradiction to our previous one. So what's the source? Where's the psukim? So the pasuk describing the incident of the mefuta, that's when a man seduces a young girl. That's considered to be a violation of her rights, and he needs to pay a fine. So the fine that he needs to pay is called kesef yishkol k'mayar habsulos. He has to pay money. It has to be yishkol, which the Gemara understands to mean it's shkolim. K'mayar habsulos, like the amount that you pay for basulas. That is referring to the sugya of a somebody who rapes a woman. Over there it says it has to be 50. It doesn't say that it's shkolim there. Here it says shkolim, there it says 50. So we learned that both of them have to pay 50 shkolim. Now, mayar absulos is a concept, it's a phrase which is used to refer to the ksuba amount that when Shechem told the Bnei Yaakov, give me harba alai moihar umat, and give me a lot of responsibilities to pay for Dina, he used the word moihar. So this is referring to the ksuba, the amount that he guarantees for her financial security. So therefore you see that the Torah talks about moihar habsules, and moihar habsules, that's a ksuba. So anyway, so we have a contradiction between the two abraises. So the Gemara says switch the second one. Rabbi Gamliel is the one who really says it's deraisa, and the Chachamim are the one who say that it's derbanan. So the Gemara, why you switch the second one? Maybe switch the first one. Maybe it's the other way around. The Gemara says no. We have a different source. We have a Mishnah where Rabbi Gamliel also seems to indicate that Kesubos is a deraisa. That's discussing the type of coinage one needs to use if he married a woman in one place and he's getting divorced in a different place. Let's say he married her in Eretz Yisrael and he's divorcing her in Kapotkia, or vice versa. The coinage in these places are different. In Eretz Yisrael, it's a much lighter coin and less valuable. In Kapotkia, it's a much heavier coin. So which one does he have to use to pay her? So Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says he has to use the heavier coin because it's a deraisa. That's the reason. You have to make sure that you get the right amount, at least for sure. You have to be machmir. So therefore, you see that Rav Shimon ben Gamliel is really the one who says that it is a deraisa ksuba. Now, the Gemara has another way of explaining the second brisa that it's not a contradiction to the first brisa at all. The first brisa we said, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says that ksuba is deraisa. The second one, he seems to say that it's derabanan. So the Gemara, there's missing words there. You have to add in, after he says that ksuba is a deraisa, after Tanakama says ksuba is deraisa, it's really all Rav Shimon ben Gamliel speaking. And he continues and he says, ksuba of a psula is a deraisa, but ksuba of an almana, that's a derabanan. That's where he said that ksuba is a derabanan. You have to add in the phrase here where he switches to talking about ksuba derabanan of an almana. And that is only 100 zuz. It's less than that which you give to a besula, which is 200 zuz. All right, now the Gemara goes into a list of incidents where people came to Talmidei Chachamim and claimed Pesach Besuach or some other way of knowing that the wife was not a psula and how the Chachamim handled it. So the first one is a man who came to Rav Nachman and he said, Pesach Besuach Matasi, I found an opening. So Rav Nachman told the Talmidim, bring branches of a tree and whip the guy. Why? Because it seems to be that he's been consorting with prostitutes who are lying in front of him from the town of Varchosa. What's the reason? Because how does this guy know Pesach B'tzuach Matasi? How is he such an expert? How is he so experienced? So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? I thought Rav Nachman is the one who says that he's trusted. So the Gemara says, yeah, he is trusted. He's trusted that he knows Pesach B'tzuach Matasi, but what business does he have knowing these things? He shouldn't know that. Obviously, he was engaging in illicit behavior and therefore he deserves to be beaten. The Gemara gives a second approach, which is that no, it's not that he is being whipped for knowing. He's being whipped for lying and or for assuming he knows something that he doesn't know. And the Rav Nachman said he's trusted. That was talking about someone who was married before. This person was never married before, and therefore he shouldn't know, and therefore he's getting himself beaten over the head with branches for that. Okay, second story, somebody came to Rabbi Gamliel. He said Pesach B'tzuach Matzasi. Rabbi Gamliel said, there's two versions of this. Starting to the first one, he said, maybe you came in, you did your abiyah at an angle, and therefore you didn't notice the psulim, you didn't notice the hymen. How's that? So if somebody comes to his house at night and the door is partially open, and it's pitch black and he can't see anything, so if he walks towards his doorway straight, he's going to bang into the door. He'll know that he hit the door. If he comes in at an angle, he'll walk right through the partially open door. He's not going to notice. So that's what happened with you. You didn't feel the basulim because you came in at an angle. The second version is that he said maybe you hit it on purpose at an angle, in which case he was saying that if you enter in a very forceful way at an angle, you can knock out the basulim without tearing them, and therefore you won't even feel it. And the mashal there is somebody who comes marching into his house very forcefully will knock the door off the hinges. He'll knock the door and the lock all out in one instant, in one shot, and it's like the door was never there at all. So that's what you did. Okay. Says the Gemara, another incident that happened. Somebody came before Rabban Gamliel, Bar Rebbe, that's a great grandson of the previous Rabban Gamliel. And he said, Rebbe, I did bia and I didn't find any blood. There was no dam b'sulim. So Rabban Gamliel said, he spoke to the wife, and she said, I was a psula. So he said, bring the sheet. They brought the sheet and they soaked it in water. They washed off the zera. And when the zera was washed off, they found drops of blood on it from before. So he said, go and acquire your purchase. Go, zechei b'mekchacha, take what it is that you bought. Because there really was blood there. So the Gemara says that Huna Mar the son of Rava mi Parskaya, said to Rav Ashi, why don't we do that too? Let's also wash off the zera. If we ever have an incident like this, let's also wash it off and see if we can find blood under there. They said, no, it's not going to work for us. Rabbi Gamliel had a washing method. Either he had water, which was good for washing, or he had a soap, which was good, which could get off the zera and not the blood. The only way we could get the zera off is by scraping it or pressing it with a stone, and that would take off the blood as well, and therefore we wouldn't be able to use this procedure. Okay, another person came to Rabbi Gamliel bar Rebbe, and he also said, Rebbe, I did be, and I didn't find any blood. There was no dam psulim. So Rebbe spoke to the woman, and she said, I'm still a psul. My psulim were not broken. That's why there was no dam psulim. So Rabbi Gamliel wanted to do an experiment. He knew that there's a Masorah that Klal Yisrael tested the women of Gila to see who was a psul and who was not by seating them on top of an open barrel of wine and seeing if the odor or the scent of the wine came out of the mouths. But he wasn't sure how to do it. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to do it correctly, so he wanted to experiment with it first. So he said, bring 2 shifchos, and one who's a psula and one who is known to be a be'ula. And he put them each over a barrel of wine, and it worked. He was able to smell the wine coming from the mouth of the be'ula, but not from the mouth of the psula. So he did that with this girl, with this wife, and indeed he did not get any scent of the wine coming from her mouth, so he said she really is indeed a besula. Go back and continue your marriage as a chebet mekchacha, acquire your purchase. The Gemara asks, why didn't he just do the experiment straight with the girl herself? Why didn't he do the shivchos? So the Gemara explains he didn't know if it was going to work. He didn't want to experiment with the Benos Yisrael because it's a zilzul, it's not befitting for them. All right, now there was another situation where somebody came to Rabbi Gamliel Hazakin. He said, Rebbe did be and I didn't find blood. He spoke to the woman, and the woman said, I am from the family of Dorkidi. We don't have blood. We don't have dam nida. We don't have dam psulim. Rabbi Gamliel checked with her relatives if such a thing was really true, and indeed he found that was correct. They did not have, this family doesn't have dam psulim. So he said, Zechei b'mekchacha, and then he said, you're lucky. You're lucky that you were zocha, you had the merit to connect to the Dorkidi family. Why is it called Dorkidi? The word says it's a contraction of Dor Katua, the cut-off generation, because they're not going to be able to have too many children without blood. The Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina says he was comforting the man and saying, Ashrecha, great for you, but it's really not so great because a woman who doesn't have blood is not going to have many children. Like you have a brayso of Rabbi Chia, just as yeast is good for the dough, blood is good for the women. Those who have lots of blood dischargers have lots of children. Now, there's a different version of this. The first version, which we just said, was Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, who said that he said to him, Zechei b'mekchacha, you merited to join here. According to the other version, which was Rabbi Yossi bar Abba, and he said, Neschai b'mekchacha, you're stuck with what you got. There is no taina of Pesach Pesuach, there's no claim of Besulim, but so therefore you're part of this marriage, you can't get out of it, but it's going to be a little disappointing. Now, this says the Gemara, according to the one who said Zechei, what's the Zchus? What's so good about it? So we just said that it's not good to be without blood. So no, it is good in an extent. You don't have Nida Shilas. You're not going to end up in a situation of Safek Nida. You'll avoid that. Okay, another story. Somebody came before Rebbe and he said, I did be and I didn't find any dam psulim. What did she say? She said, I'm still a psula. It turns out that it was a famine. And Rebbe looked at them and saw that their faces were black from hunger. They didn't have anything to eat. So he told his avadim, and they took them into a wash. They washed in the bathhouse. They gave them food and drink. After they were revived, he gave them a room. And there they did their bia, and indeed they found dam sulam, and he said, you've merited that which you purchased. Now Rebbe applied to them the pasuk, which says, Tzefed oram al atzmam, yovesh hayakaetz. Their skin stuck to them, to the bones, atzamam, and they became dry as wood. All right, this concludes the Gemara. We now begin the next Mishnah. which discusses the concept of ksuba. So it says that a besula, one who is a virgin, gets a ksuba of 200 zuz. An almana, a widow, gets a ksuba of 100 zuz. She's considered to be less of a purchase because she was already married before. She's already a bula from it before. Now, what about a woman who was married before but is still a psula? That's a woman who did erison. She was engaged, which is considered to be marriage to some extent, but she's still an psula. Now, how did she get out of the erison? Either she's widowed from it, or she was divorced from it, or her husband died and she fell to Yibam and she got chalitza. All of these situations, she is in Amana, Gusha, or Chalutza, all of them get a regular ksuba of 200 zuz, just like any other psula. However, if they prove not to be besulim, there is a claim against them. In Amana, of course, there's no claim against her. She can't lose her 100 zuz, because what's he going to say? She's not a besula. She's not claiming to be a besula. These women are claiming to be a besula. If they prove, if they turn out not to be besulim, then they will lose the full 200 zuz. So there's a bit of a risk there. All right, now the Gemara goes into the meaning of certain words and how they were derived. So the word almana, the Gemara says, comes from the word almana. She got a mana. A mana is 100 zuz. So that's why she's called an almana. Says the Gemara, what about an almana minha ersin? An almana who is a besua. She's also called an almana, but she gets 200 zuz. Someone says, okay, she just has a borrowed term almana, because her almana has come to mean a woman whose husband had died. She, even though she doesn't have a mana, but her husband indeed had died. So the Gemara asks, but how can that be? The term almana is mentioned in the Torah, and ksuba is not in the Torah. Ksuba is a gezeres chachamim. So how could the term almana be used there? So the Gemara says that it was for the future. In the future, the chachamim were going to create a takana, and therefore the word almana was applied already then. So Gemara says you have psukim that write things about the future. Gemara says yes. If you look in Ma'aseh Bereshis, it discusses the 4 rivers coming out of Eden. It says V'shem anar shlishi chidekel hu ahalach kidmas Ashur. The 3rd river is called Chidekel. It's the one that flows east of Ashur. What's Ashur? The Gemara says Ashur is Seleucia. It's a place in Syria. It's not classic Syria. It's a place in Syria. It's a city there, and that's what's referred to by Ashur. So you see, that city obviously wasn't built yet. Nothing was built yet at the time of Ma'aseh Bereshis, but it's called Ashur because it's going to be built there soon. Now, this entire discussion about these names came from Rav Chana Bagdasar, Rav Chanana of Baghdad. The Gemara now, before it continues with its explanation of names, brings other things from Rav Chanana of Baghdad. Also, some of them are explaining words and some aren't. First of all, he says, what is rain? It says rain gives water, it saturates the ground, it fertilizes the ground, and it gives a special shine to fruits, and it adds growth to the fruits. This is not, Rashi says, based on the word. This is just logic. What he says are the capabilities of rain. Now, the Gemara brings another statement to support this. Rabbi Bar Yishmael said, some says of Yemen Bar Shalema. What's the pasuk that says that? Pasuk in Tehillim, Tilomeha Ravei, Naches Gidudea Barvivim, Temagigena, Tzimcha Tevarech. You saturate its hills, you flatten out its rows, that's the rows that are dug by the plow, you soften it with rain, and you bless its growth. Okay, going back to words, in a similar way, the Gemara says, Mizbeach comes from the words Meziach, Mezin, Mechabev, Mechaper. It knocks away Averos, it provides food that is sustenance for the mitzvah of the karbanos on the mizbeach, and their tzchos we get food in the world. They also create mechabev, they create love between a Jew and his God, and mechaper, they also atone for averos. The Gemara says, what's the difference between meziach and mechaper? Meziach is pushing away averos, mechaper is atoning for averos. What's the difference? So the Gemara says that meziach is for gzeros. It pushes away the punishment of the avera. It knocks out the gzera that's made because of it. Mechaper actually takes off the avera itself, so that the avera does not exist. Okay, Rav Chana Bagdasah said further, Tamarim, the dates of a tree, they warm the body, they make a person full, they loosen the stomach, they sometimes you need loosening, sometimes loosening isn't good, but the dates will loosen. They also provide energy. And even though they're very good, they don't make a person finicky, mefunak. So the Gemara says more about the dates. Rav says if one ate the dates, he shouldn't paskin. He shouldn't give rulings in halacha. So apparently the dates mess up a person's sense of judgment, at least temporarily. Someone asks, we have a brisa that seems to say that dates are good. The brisa says that it's good to eat the dates after food. Eat it in the morning, after breakfast, it's good. Eat it in the evening, after supper, it's good. In the afternoon, it's not good if you eat it before the meal. If you eat it just afternoon, just after lunch, there's nothing better than that. Rashi says, because even if it makes him need the restroom, he'll be out in the fields. There's plenty of places to go. Now, they also cancel three things. They cancel intestinal stomach aches, bad thoughts, and hemorrhoids. So the Gemara's question, therefore, is that the dates are very good. Why would Rav say that you shouldn't paskin if you ate dates? Dates really are good. So the Gemara says there's not a kasha. The dates are good in the long term, but their immediate effect is somewhat disorienting, like wine. Wine is good for you in the long term, but immediately after drinking wine, one should not paskin because it affects his judgment. Another explanation is that the dates are only good after eating bread, after lunch, but before bread, it's no good. Like Abaye says, my mother, it's referring to Abaye as a stepmother. Abaye never met his mother. My mother said that eat the dates before bread is like hitting a tree with an axe. Eating the dates after bread is like a bar to a door. That is, it strengthens and supports it. All right, more words. The Gemara says that a door is called a dasha. Why is that? That's a contraction of derech sham. People go in through there. A ladder is called a darga. That's a contraction of derech gag. It's the way to the roof. A bed is called a puria. It's a contraction of parin v'ravin, which is puravu, which is the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying, which people do on the bed. Now, one more thing. The Gemara says, Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, hey, I have one too. The word ailanus, which is a term for a woman who has masculine characteristics and cannot bear children. That's a contraction of ayal, meaning a ram, and nis, meaning which is she is like an ayal. So she has male characteristics. She's therefore like the ram, and that is why she's called an ailanus.